You know that feeling when you're sitting on your back porch on a Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, and you realize you don't owe a single person anything. Not your boss, not your bank, not the credit card company that has been sending you statements for 20 years. The coffee actually tastes better when that weight is gone, and that quiet little moment might be the clearest sign that you've already won a race. Most retirees don't even know they're losing. We spend decades obsessing over one number, the balance in the retirement account, and we completely ignore three signals that actually separate retirees who are thriving from retirees who are just surviving. When I started digging into the data on this, it kind of shocked me because the signs aren't what you'd expect. They're small and quiet, and most people who have them don't even realize how rare they are. I am Aisha, and I spend way too much of my free time reading retirement research, so you don't have to. Today I want to walk you through three little signs, things you might already be doing right now, that put you ahead of roughly 95% of retirees in this country. Not because you got lucky or inherited money, but because you made a handful of quiet decisions that almost nobody else makes. Think of retirement like a garden. Everyone focuses on the big showy stuff, like rose bushes and fountains and fancy patio furniture. But the gardens that actually survive, year after year survive, because someone took care of the soil underneath. The soil is the boring stuff, the stuff nobody posts about online. And the three signs I'm going to talk about today are all soil. They're invisible to your neighbors, but they are the reason some retirees sleep well at night while others lie awake doing math in their heads at 3 a.m. The first one sounds almost too simple to matter. You have a written financial plan, not a vague idea floating around in your head, not a number you saw on a blog once and thought, yeah, that sounds about right. An actual plan, written down or saved somewhere, that you've looked at more than once this year. Here's the thing. The numbers on this are wild. According to the Charles Schwab Modern Wealth Survey from 2023, only about 25 to 30% of Americans have a formal written financial plan, which means roughly 7 out of 10 people are just winging it. And that gets worse when you zoom into retirement specifically, because the Employee Benefit Research Institute runs this annual retirement confidence survey, and their 2024 data showed that only about 48% of workers have even attempted to calculate how much money they need in retirement. Not how much they've saved, how much they'll need. Half the country hasn't even done the math. This is where the soil metaphor kicks in, because a written plan is the foundation. Everything else grows from. Without one, your 401k is just a number. Your Social Security strategy is a guess, and your timeline runs entirely on vibes. I know that sounds harsh, and honestly this sucks to hear because so many smart people skip this step. They earn good money, they save consistently, and they assume that is enough. But saving without a plan is like watering a garden without knowing what you planted, where you might be drowning the tomatoes and completely ignoring the herbs. Your plan doesn't need to fill 50 pages. It can be a 2-page document that answers 4 questions. How much do I need per year in retirement? Where is that money coming from, whether that is Social Security, savings, a pension, or whatever combination applies? What is my backup if something goes wrong? And when do I want this to start? If you can answer those 4 questions with actual numbers attached, you're already in the top third. Share that plan with a spouse, a financial advisor, or even a trusted friend who will hold you accountable, and you move into the top quarter easily. Fidelity publishes this retirement savings benchmark that says you should aim for about 10 times your final salary by age 67. So if you are earning $80,000, that target sits at $800,000. That number makes a lot of people feel anxious, and I get it. But here is what the plan does for you. It takes that scary lump sum and breaks it into pieces you can actually look at without wanting to close the browser tab. Monthly income projections, withdrawal rates, Social Security timing decisions, and tax strategies all become visible once you write them down. The boulder turns into pebbles, and pebbles you can carry. Now let's talk about the second sign, and this one surprises people because it has nothing to do with money. You move your body on purpose, most days of the week. I am not talking about training for a marathon or doing CrossFit or hiring a personal trainer. Walking for 30 minutes counts. Stretches count. Lifting a few light weights a couple of times a week counts. The reason this qualifies as such a powerful sign comes down to one simple fact. Almost nobody actually does it. CDC physical activity guidelines recommend that adults 65 and older get at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week, plus 2 sessions of muscle strengthening exercises, which works out to a 30-minute walk 5 days a week, and 2 days of some kind of resistance work. Only about 27 to 28% of adults 65 and older meet both of those guidelines according to the CDC's own data, so barely more than 1 in 4. If you're taking a daily walk and occasionally picking up a dumbbell, that alone places you in the top 30% of your age group. But here is where this connects back to the soil of your retirement garden, because the health cost data on retirees is, honestly kind of sobering. Fidelity's 2024 retiree healthcare cost estimate puts the price tag at roughly $315,000 for a 65-year-old couple to cover healthcare expenses through retirement, and that figure doesn't include long-term care. A private room in a nursing home runs about $9,700 a month, according to Genworth's cost of care data from 2023, which works out to almost $117,000 a year. On top of that, the Department of Health and Human Services estimates that about 70% of people turning 65 will need some form of long-term care eventually. Every time you go for that walk, every time you do those squats that feel kind of silly in your living room, you're not just maintaining your fitness. You're actively defending your retirement savings from the single biggest expense most retirees face. Physical activity works as a financial strategy, and I know that sounds like a stretch, no pun intended, but the research backs it up. 80% of older adults have at least one chronic condition, according to the National Council on Aging, and 68% carry two or more. Chronic conditions drain your savings slowly, year after year, like weeds taking over that garden bed you forgot about. Before we get to the third sign, I want to mention something real quick. If this kind of content helps you, if it makes you think differently about where you actually stand, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I'm not going to beg, but the algorithm works in strange ways, and subscribing genuinely helps this channel reach people who are looking for exactly this kind of thing. Here's the part most people miss, and honestly, it is the one I care about the most. You have people in your life you talk to on a regular basis, and you have something that gets you out of bed that isn't an obligation. Social connection and a sense of purpose. That is the third sign. Before you roll your eyes and assume this is the soft, fluffy stuff that doesn't matter, let me throw some numbers at you. In May of 2023, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy issued an official advisory calling loneliness and social isolation a public health epidemic. Not a concern, not a trend, an epidemic. The research cited in that advisory showed that prolonged social isolation increases the risk of premature death by roughly 26%. And to put that in context, that is comparable to the health impact of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. About 24% of Americans aged 65 and older qualify as socially isolated according to the National Academies of Sciences, and an ARP survey from 2020 found that 53% of adults over 50 reported feeling lonely, though that number was almost certainly pushed higher by pandemic conditions. Even cutting that figure in half still leaves you with a quarter of retirees who feel genuinely disconnected from the people around them. And that is where the purpose piece comes in. Research published in JAMA Network Open in 2019 found that people with a strong sense of purpose had measurably lower risk of dying from all causes. A separate study from the journal Psychological Science by researchers Patrick Hill and Nicholas Tirianatid, a sense of purpose to reduce mortality across the entire lifespan, not just in old age. Look at what retirees actually do with their time, though. Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers showed that only about 24% of Americans over 65 volunteer, a separate body of research. And I'll be careful here because the numbers are debated, suggests that retirement may increase the probability of clinical depression by a margin as high as 40%. Though some researchers argue that reflects correlation rather than causation, the point is this. If you have 2 or 3 people you genuinely talk to every week, not surface level, how is the weather stuff, but real conversation. And if you have something you care about doing, whether that is gardening, an actual garden this time, or a community group, or a creative project, or even work you choose to do on your own terms, you are in rare company. Connection and purpose represent the richest soil in the whole garden. I've seen people with $2 million in their retirement account who are miserable, and I've seen people with $400,000 who are genuinely happy, and the difference almost always traces back to those two things. So let's bring all of this together. 3 little signs. You have a written financial plan with real numbers in it. You move your body with intention and consistency. And you have people you're connected to along with something that makes your days feel meaningful. None of those are flashy, and none of them are going to land you a segment on CNBC. But together they represent something genuinely rare in this country, a retiree who took care of the soil, and not just the flowers. Financial clarity combined with physical health and human connection puts you so far ahead of the average retiree that the gap is almost hard to believe. The median retirement savings for Americans 65 to 74 sits at about $200,000, according to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. And at a 4% withdrawal rate, that gives you about $8,000 a year on top of Social Security, which averages roughly $1,976 a month as of early 2025. That is the reality for most people. If you plan beyond that, if you are protecting your health, and if you invested in your relationships the way you invested in your portfolio, yeah, you beaten 95% of retirees. And you probably did it so quietly that nobody noticed, including you. Here is what I want to know. Which of these 3 signs do you feel strongest about? And which one do you think you need to work on? Drop it in the comments, because I genuinely read them, and I think it helps everybody when we're honest about where we actually stand. If you haven't already, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.